The justices of the Supreme Court have just heard a dispute in a very important set of cases, two cases involving affirmative action in American universities. One involves Harvard University, a private university, but one that does have relations with the government contracts, and so on. The other, a state university, University of North Carolina. And these universities are being sued by a group called Students for Fair Admissions. And they're being sued for engaging in widespread and systematic racial preferences. Now, for many years, these universities tried to hide and disguise what they were doing. They would say things like, well, when two applicants apply and they have similar credentials, we kind of give a nod to the one that is coming from a minority or disadvantaged background. It's become very clear, and these cases affirm this, that we're now talking not about equally qualified applicants and giving somebody a nudge. We're talking about candidates who are completely different in their academic preparation, their grades, their test scores, their extracurriculars, their recommendations, and by and large, academically inferior candidates are chosen and given admissions, and superior candidates are turned away. This is done on the basis of race. By and large, what universities do is they identify candidates, applicants, as members of either underrepresented or overrepresented groups. And they use kind of broad categories. So the broad category is like white, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American. And you fall into one of these camps. Now, right away, you can see that these camps are a little problematic. I mean, consider two guys who apply to UNC North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill, or to Harvard. One guy is an Afghan who came as a refugee from Afghanistan in after the long period of turmoil over there, and the other is a guy from Spain. Now, the guy from Afghanistan is classified as an Asian because he's lumped in with the Chinese and Japanese and the Indians. And since the Asian, Indians, and Chinese are really smart and have really high grades and test scores, there are sort of too many of them. So the Afghan is like, you're privileged. You're privileged. And then you turn to the Spanish guy who's white, and but his last name is, Diego Rivera. And so, wow, he's classified as Hispanic, he's Spanish speaking. And so this guy now gets a benefit. Points are added to his score. He gets a leg up. It's easier for him or her to get in over the Afghan because the Afghan falls into the wrong category. So this, as you can see, there's a kind of madness to all this. And all of this comes before the Supreme Court. And what this group, Students for Fair Admissions, is very clever in doing is they put the Asian Americans out front and they go, wait a minute, look at this. You got these Asian Americans, and by the way, they've been themselves victims of historic discrimination. Ever heard of the Chinese restriction laws? Ever heard of the Exclusion Acts against Asians? Ever heard about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II? There's been this kind of, there's been this history against Asian Americans. So Asian Americans are not discriminators. They're not benefits of any kind of historical privilege. And yet, they are the main targets of affirmative action. Why? Because they're the most successful group. Even more successful than whites. So whites are disadvantaged by affirmative action, but Asians even more. Now, the excuse used by these universities to do this, they don't like to blatantly take an Asian with, let's just say, a perfect SAT score and put him to the side and give the seat to a black or Hispanic who has basically a markedly inferior score. So what they do is they pretend that Asians fall short on all the extracurriculars. Now, it doesn't really work because Asians, play the violin and they're really good in chess and they do community service. So that doesn't really work. So what Harvard does is they have a personality index, and the Asians always rated low. So this is their way of doing it. They pretend like Asians lack compassion. Asians aren't very witty. Asians don't really have any sense of community. And all of this was picked up by Justice Alito, who turns to the Harvard lawyer and he goes, why are you saying all this about Asians? Are you actually saying that Asians emotionally and morally are inferior to other groups? You're ranking them on lower scores. So either you are accurately describing the inferiority of the Asians in these areas, or you're using it as a false pretext to deny them admission. And then the Harvard guy backs off and he basically goes, well, we don't really, yes, we do this ranking, but it doesn't really, it fades into the background, was his phrase. So in other words, a blatant lie. Because, and this is what these universities have become. They're like the media. They've become ultimately wedded to a kind of a deeply entrenched racial system. They don't want to admit it. They can't really intellectually defend it. And so when they're put up against the wall, they lie about it.